Hey everybody, this is Diana Rodgers, and I am an NTP living on a working organic farm outside of Boston. I'm also a registered dietitian. I have a clinical practice in Concord, Massachusetts, where I work mostly with people with gut issues, IBS, celiac, those types of things, and then also metabolic issues, so like type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, fixing people's blood sugar and gut issues with real food. So although I'm a registered dietitian, I do preach everything that I learned at NTA. Sometimes I work with ketogenic diets, sometimes I do paleo, sometimes I do Whole30. I'm a Whole30 coach as well. So hi Lisa, and thanks for having me on NTA. I don't even remember if I mentioned, but I live on a working farm here with my husband and 2 kids, and we raise organic vegetables here and also pastured meats. So we do sheep and pigs that roam through the woods, and goats and chickens for eggs. And then also every vegetable you can imagine, lots of leafy greens. Everything's getting started in the greenhouse right now. It's a very cold spring, and so we're kind of held back a little bit from really being able to get things in the ground, because I think we're getting another batch of snow coming in a few days, which is super unusual. For the last several years, I've been really focusing on sustainability issues and kind of where that intersects sustainability with diet, and really looking at sort of why a lot of people in the eco movement are very anti-meat from ecological perspectives, and then meat is also vilified nutritionally from a lot of mainstream dietitians. Certainly in the program that I went to for my RD, it was very vegetarian and vegan friendly, and not very happy to endorse eating meat. And so I've been writing a lot about this on my blog, Sustainable Dish, and on my podcast. I've been interviewing people in the health and farming world. Last summer, kind of late summer, I decided to work on a film. So the film I'm working on is called Kale versus Cow: The Case for Better Meat. And we just kind of finished our main push with our crowdfunder, and so we were fortunate enough to do really well. We raised enough money to get started. We're still looking for more funding, so folks can join in at sustainabledish.com/film. We are now in production, so we just got back last week from our second shoot. We were out in Indiana and filming a doctor who's using lots of animal products to help people reverse their type 2 diabetes, get off insulin. It's all through diet and real food. Really exciting stuff. We're tracking some of the patients in this one clinic, but really the whole community in this small town is on board with this, real food way of eating. The police chief, the mayor, everybody. It's really exciting stuff. We're also tracking a slaughterhouse story that's opening here in Massachusetts, a nonprofit slaughterhouse, and kind of looking into, the people that are for it, the people who are building it, and then why some people might be protesting it and what that's all about, and talking to those folks as well. So that's really exciting that we've gotten some sort of anti-meat people to open up to us and share their perspective with us. We also have a ton of other stories that we're booking right now, and just kind of organizing our filming around. So that's all coming up. And let's see, later next week I will be on a panel, and I'll be moderating a panel and speaking more about the film at Paleo FX, and also talking about doing a private workshop for folks who are interested in becoming nutritionists, and just talking about the differences between RD versus NTP versus health coach, like kind of, what might make sense for each person's individual situation, what they want to do with their career, that kind of stuff. So that's next week. And let's see, does NTA, do you guys have any questions for me. I'm used to kind of doing like a back and forth a little bit. So what would make the biggest impact for customers besides buying direct from them? So, you know, obviously buying direct from farmers is ideal, but I know that's not possible for everyone's busy schedule. And I do think that sustainability moving forward needs to look like a lot of different things and meet people where they are. So there are great options. Actually, Thrive Market just came out with a really good meat program, and actually cooked some of it yesterday. So it's probably still in my Instagram stories. I made some steaks and some pork chops from Instagram. From Thrive Market that I put on my Instagram story. Butcher Box is also a really great option. It's affordable, and really high quality grass-fed beef and other meats. So I think that, you know, I mean, they even sell grass-fed beef at Walmart. So, you know, there's lots of different ways people can get involved. You know, if you don't have the money to put up front for half a cow and, you know, storing it in a chest freezer, there's definitely great options. But even if we're looking at, oh yeah, shout out to US Wellness Meats, definitely. They're awesome as well, and they contributed to the campaign. So did Butcher Box. Epic is another great source of snacks. With, you know, their bison bars and all their different jerkies. They were backers of the film as well. Severe acid reflux. So I think most people, I'm just answering a question here, most people from NTA would actually probably argue that this may be from having too low stomach acid. There's a great book that actually was in my reading for NTA called Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. And it talks about acid reflux and GERD and in other conditions, and how actually why you might be low in stomach acid and having acid reflux from that. So you can check out that book, or book an appointment with an NTC, who could probably help you get your stomach acid back up to speed. There's some supplements you can take for that. Let's see. So I was talking about where to get meat. I should mention too that even typical beef that is grain finished is still probably a better choice nutritionally, ethically, and environmentally than eating a ton of chicken. So I know that people, you know, they see chicken as sort of a cleaner meat. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that it's usually not on a bone and it's white. But if we're looking ethically to cause least harm, right? The least amount of, Paleo Valley. I do have to shout out to Paleo Valley. They are the official snack stick of my film. Everyone on my crew just loves chomping on them. We don't end up taking a lunch break often until very late, and we're just pretty much living on Paleo Valley snack sticks. So, hey Rachel, how are you? Let's see. So I'm getting off track here. Oh, I wanted to talk about chicken and versus beef. So, if we're looking to cause least harm and really, how many animals are dying for you to survive, beef has chicken by a long shot, right? So one steer can provide almost 500 pounds of meat. Think about how many chickens need to die in order for that. And then also the typical living conditions for, if we're talking about just grocery store meat, you've got chickens, they live in confinement in CAFOs under, artificial lights in horrible conditions, where your typical cow that, may end up in a feedlot, at least they can move around. They're usually outdoors, and most of their life is spent on grass. So cows aren't like born on a feedlot, and they don't spend their entire lives on feedlots. And environmentally as well, cows don't, when they are finished with grain, it's not 100% grain. So chickens are eating 100% grain. CAFO pork eats 100% grain, but cattle would not do well if they were eating 100% grain. Most of the mix that cows get, even when they're finished on grain, is crop residues. So like the corn stalks left over from a corn harvest, things like that. So the actual grain that cows are getting is a much smaller percentage than those numbers out there. So I've seen numbers of like 12 to 1, 12 pounds of grain to 1 pound of beef. And that's actually completely untrue. I went through the math and looked at it, and cows actually have a grain to flesh ratio better than chicken. And I have a post on that. But also nutritionally, red meat trumps chicken. So chicken does not have any iron and B12. Red meat has that. Those are the leading nutrient deficiencies worldwide, according to the CDC. And so if you were to compare, chicken to beef, even, if we're not talking about pasture chicken and grass-fed beef, just chicken to beef, you've got a lot more omega-6s in chicken because chickens eat grain 100%, unless you get a pastured chicken. But even in a pastured situation, I mean, birds eat grains and seeds. That's what they eat. So, so if you're looking at the omega fats, if you're looking at nutrient density, chicken is just inferior to red meat. That's just the way it is. So, so I highly recommend folks, like, even if they don't have access to any grass-fed beef at all, they should still choose beef over chicken if a grocery store meat is the only option. Let's see. I have an upcoming road trip with a vegan in the group. Any sound bites if they give me a hard time when I'm eating my meat? There are lots of different types of vegans, and some of them can be really intense, and some of them are totally, this is their personal choice, and they don't try to impose those. So I think hopefully you're ending up in a car, Nicole, with somebody who is making it their personal choice and not their mission in life to convert everybody to veganism. It can be really difficult to argue with somebody who is an ethical vegan and this is sort of their religious identity. And so it's just, it's sort of pointless, and I don't really like to engage on that level with folks. Nutritionally, there's no argument there. I mean, meat is a nutrient-dense food. And plants are inferior to animal products. So that's a pretty easy one. If you look at the environmental piece, I mean, land use is something that a lot of people don't really realize, but you cannot crop everywhere in the world. It's just, think of Iceland, think of, Norway, think of a lot of Africa. That cropping is, standard agriculture, growing soybeans and corn is it's something that's possible in a lot of the US, and we Americans like to think that everything in the world is just like America, and it's not. So there's a reason why the Mongolians are hurting people, and it's because they can't crop Mongolia. It's not conducive to it. So most of the world's landmass is actually more suitable to pasture animal grazing. And so, when you look at, how are we going to feed the world, there's very little croppable land left. And what is left that's croppable is still, pretty marginal, and, we're going to have to cut down some rainforest or something. And so if we're looking at feeding the world, just cropped vegetables, we have to consider the biodiversity loss of turning, forest or pasture land into cropland. We have to look at the water resources required to, not only grow, but also process a lot of these grains into things that are edible to humans. So, most of our grain consumption is not pearl barley, right? It's processed foods, which like tofurkey, there's a lot of water used in order to make tofurkey. So, if we look at eating less animals that eat grains and more animals that are eating grasses, we can actually come up with a pretty healthy and sustainable diet where the animals don't need to compete with us for croppable land. We can feed them grasses and keep them healthier, make a better quality meat, and then use cropland for whatever cereals people need, and then vegetables. So that's my little piece on land use. All right, I'm just going to throw it out there. Leo DiNardo is the ambassador of Chicken for Sustainability. Have you considered reaching out to Chris Pratt? I have tried reaching out to Chris Pratt, and I have not been able to. People have tagged me a bunch of times in his social media, and I haven't heard anything. So I'm sure he gets a lot of, people hitting him up. So I think that in Leonardo DiCaprio's film Before the Flood, which was on National Geographic, the big thing that they're saying there is eat chicken instead of beef. If people just, had chicken instead of hamburgers, then, we'd solve a lot of problems. And, and meanwhile, he also said that, there was a woman sitting there talking to him about, our travel and our use of fossil fuels. And he's like, well, that's not going to happen. We're not going to stop traveling, but I guess people could eat chicken instead of beef. And that is 100% nutritionally, environmentally, and ethically the wrong advice, in my opinion. So I think it's just misguided. I think he's probably somebody who is really passionate and really wants to do the right thing. And I think he just doesn't have all the information. I think that, the idea of chicken over meat or plants over vegetables in general is a really simplistic way of looking at things. As a food producer and dietitian, I have a much deeper understanding of human nutrition and of, natural cycles and natural farming. And, eating industrially raised chicken is not the solution. What other questions do you guys have? Hit me up with some more questions. I'll just hang out. I'll see if there's any more questions that I missed. I wish I could tolerate beef. Not there yet. Pasture chicken is what I have to go for now. I just released a podcast yesterday with Paul Grieve of Pasturebird, and I really like what they're doing. If you do have access to pastured chicken, it's definitely a really good product. It's just really hard to come by compared to grass-fed beef. So that's why I usually recommend folks go for beef over chicken, but definitely pasture-raised beef or pasture-raised chicken is an awesome product. Vital Choice Seafood is also a really great company that I love what they're doing, and they're involved in a film project too about brain health. So I really like them a lot. Leonardo DiCaprio is involved with Kiss the Ground. Yeah, there's another film on its way out called Kiss the Ground, talking about soil health, and I have heard that Leonardo DiCaprio is involved with that. I don't know. As far as their nutrition solutions in Kiss the Ground, I did read the book, and although the environmental solutions seem to point to grass-fed beef, the nutrition solutions in the Kiss the Ground book are much more conventional and seem to point folks in the direction of more like Walter Willett type nutrition. So, canola oil and chicken and low fat and stuff like that. So unfortunately, I don't think that I'll probably align with the nutrition recommendations in the Kiss the Ground film, if there are any, just because of the book, which was based on the film, again, just had very sort of, unfortunately outdated advice that seems to conflict with their environmental solutions. So, I love what Kiss the Ground is doing, and I think the folks at Kiss the Ground are a little bit separate from the film team. So there's that too. But I have had Lauren Tucker on my podcast, and we, had a nice conversation about soil health. They seem to really get that. And also lab meats. So we're both on the same page about, lab meats are definitely not the solution. So environmentally, nutritionally, just not a good solution. So I'm psyched about that. So I think there's room to support everybody who is, trying to do good by good soil. And so I fully support what they're doing. Let's see. What are your current book or film recommendations to learn more about the health of red meat. So the health of red meat, Chris Kresser's website has a lot of really good information on, you know, the importance of red meat nutritionally. So I really defer to Chris for a lot of that stuff. Chris Masterjohn also is a pretty good resource for nutrition information. Chris Masterjohn, PhD, I believe is his website. He also just, I did a podcast with him recently about nutritional lab testing, by the way. It was really, really great. And he has like an ebook that's out. So I have a link to that, to the podcast. And we talk about the book that he just came out with on my podcast. It's like an ebook. Let's see. I'm losing track again. This is really hard to do this interview, by the way, guys, without having somebody talking to you. So just sitting in your living room, talking at a computer is not. It's a little awkward. Okay. What other books? Let's see. Nicolette Nyman wrote a book called Defending Beef, which touches a little bit on the nutrient part, a lot on the environmental part. Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise, talks a lot about the benefits of the fats in animal products. So butter and cheese, not as much on the protein in meat. I have looked at the protein of grass-fed beef compared to typical beef, and I have to say that, you know, there are very strong environmental and ethical reasons to eat grass-fed beef. Not such strong nutritional reasons to eat grass-fed beef. So although there are more omega-3s in grass-fed beef compared to typical beef, it's not a significant portion of the fatty acid profile of beef to begin with when we're looking at steaks. And so nutritionally, it's, you know, I just try to get people in my practice to eat meat. And then, you know, once they've sort of healed themselves and want to dive deeper, then we talk about grass-fed beef for environmental and ethical reasons. But nutritionally, I have to say, just, you know, red meat is really an important food for humans. Let's see. I'm looking at, Rachel is talking about my podcast with Jason Roundtree and Paige Stanley. So there was just a recent study that came out of Michigan State talking about, they did a life cycle analysis of well-managed grass-fed beef compared to continually grazed grass-fed beef compared to feedlot beef, and found that in a well-managed system, the carbon sink actually, the carbon sequestered by the cattle actually offset any methane emissions. So this is huge and really important work. I have a post on that right on my homepage, actually, and where I summarized the study, and then I also interviewed Jason and Paige for my podcast. And so you can learn more about the study directly from the researchers on the podcast, and then I did summarize the study for folks that wanted it kind of broken down into more lay speak. But there's a big difference in the types of grass-fed beef. So I could talk about that really quickly. There's continuous grazing, and then there's the more intensive management, like Savory Institute's holistic management, or what Jason Roundtree calls adaptive multi-paddock grazing. So in continuous grazing, the cow's on the same patch of land the whole time. Unfortunately, in that type of a situation, the cows can go around, they can overgraze their favorite parts of grass. They end up killing their favorite parts because they graze it too much. They damage the roots, and then that grass doesn't grow back. And what you end up with is actually a very unhealthy pasture, because the weeds and the unfavorable forages that are out there take over. And so the land doesn't get a rest. It can't really sequester carbon effectively, and it's actually not as nutritious for the cows, and can increase parasite load on the animals, because if one cow has worms or something like that, you know, they're on the same patch of grass all day long, and then the other cows in the same paddock with them, they easily can catch the parasite. So with our animals here on the farm, we don't have cows, but we have sheep, and we move them constantly. And one of the biggest reasons we move them actually is to keep the animals healthy and to keep the parasite load down on the sheep. So that's actually the biggest reason here. It does also create lusher pastures and can help with more organic matter in the soil, which can lead to better water holding capacity. So there's sort of this lovely cascade that happens when you are moving the animals frequently. So that's the whole idea, is to mimic natural cycles, to move animals frequently, just like if you picture the African savannas and you know, animals being hunted by, you know, hyenas or coyotes or wolves. They're constantly on the move. If they stay in one place too long, they're just, you know, sitting ducks for any animal to come pick them off. So they're constantly on the move, looking for fresh grass, kind of keeping ahead of the predators. But this is also the most beneficial way for the land, because when the land is grazed intensively and then has a chance to rest, that's when the roots grow back stronger, the soil is able to sequester carbon, rain is able to better penetrate the soil, and you know, the whole system is much healthier that way. Okay, how can we stay up to date on details of the documentary release date? So get on my mailing list. sustainabledish.com/film has info on the film and how folks can donate, but also just visiting my website, sustainabledish.com, signing up for my newsletter, and you know, following me on Instagram. Sustainable Dish is my handle on Instagram. I'm probably most active on Instagram, not as much on Twitter, and not super active on Facebook, but I do have a page as Sustainable Dish. Are you writing a book too? I am trying to write a book. The film has taken over everything. So I have a full-time practice where I help people, you know, with their diets, and the film is also a full-time job. And on top of that, I have 2 kids that are in sports that I'm driving around all the time. So at the moment, I have like no thyroid, and I'm completely wiped out, and can't even seem to function just with everything that's on my plate. We have a bunch of shoots coming up. So the book is on hold right now. I hope to have a book. Maybe it'll come out with the film. The film style is storytelling, so it's not going to be as much information nuggets. The book will be more referenced and sort of more scientific, and not as much storytelling. Just because I feel like that's more effective for the book, and films that tell stories and move people emotionally are much more interesting to watch than just a whole slew of interviews. So that's it. So any other questions? I'll hang out just for a second to see if anyone else has anything they want to ask. All right. Oh, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, I'm pretty wiped out right now. Caught me at a hard time. So I'm booking out, even with my nutrition practice, like a month out. I do have an assistant dietitian who's helping me, and she's awesome, and she's all about real food, and so that's been really great. But thanks so much, NTA, for having me, and yeah, visit my site, sustainabledish.com, my podcast, my Instagram page, and thanks so much, Desiree. I'll see you guys. Okay, bye.